Okay, I think we're ready to get started. We have most people on here. So I want to thank you all for your time. Before we start, some housekeeping notes as well. This session is being recorded and will be distributed afterwards. And that means you'll be able to see a video with the audio, including the slides as well. If you have any questions, feel free to use the questions tab there. I will make sure that by the end of it, I will have addressed most of your questions. If for some reason we go over time and I'm not able to get to your questions, I'll personally email you with an answer and some resources as well. Also, towards the end of the webinar, take a look at the chat tab as well, because I will be adding resources and more information for you, including some free reports and access to our lab. So stay tuned to that and make sure that you're monitoring both questions and the chat as well. Feel free to ask anything, and we're more than happy to answer it. So let's get started. The title of today's webinar is Cloud 3.0, Complete Mobility, Data Protection, and Innovation. And the premise and the reason behind this webinar is really focusing on looking at all the research we've done as an organization, developing our product and our roadmap, talking to our customers, media, specifically analysts as well, and really understanding what has happened in the last couple of years with cloud technology, what's happened in the last year, and what does the next decade of cloud look like? And respectively, what is the cloud data management, the backup, the DR, and management solutions that you need to be able to support your goals, your innovation, and your cloud strategy at whatever stage or phase you're in. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some of the research and insights that we found as well. And let's start with something from Gartner, because I think this really illustrates exactly where organizations are today. If you think about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, really the focus of infrastructure and operations and leadership was around operations, around costs, but it all really revolved around making sure that my tech stack is up to date, that I have incremental innovations and improvements around my technology. But it was very reactive. It was very reactive to change and really focus on just making things better, making them more cost effective, and making sure that your operations are in line and everything is documented, really focused on process. What we saw afterwards, right? If you think about many of the organizations after we went, through this crazy bubble of software and disruption period, was that organizations started to shift their focus from, okay, we need to be able to ensure that IT can deliver good services, that they have the tools that they need to accelerate application development, and we also need to drive new digital demands. And so you saw a change from reactive to really focus on service-based, delivering our catalog and really focusing on making sure that it's not just about the process or the technology, but that we're actually delivering the services that are required for the organization to remain competitive. And then you see something much more aggressive, right? We're talking probably the last 3 or 4 years. And this is the focus around digital product leadership, right? So I know leaders all over really focused now on maintaining innovation, being able to drive change, being able to drive disruption, and that includes the technology that's required to do so. So instead of just having the best tech stack, having the right processes, the differentiation and factors here are speed and agility, being able to spin up resources, being able to quickly iterate, deliver prototypes and digital services that organizations need with a focus on innovation. This has incredible ramifications in our decisions around infrastructure. And obviously, as we know, the great buzzword of the last 10 years within cloud, we've seen the entire hype cycle of cloud. We saw when it first became mainstream and organizations went through incredible hype, trying to understand it, trying to adopt it as fast as possible. Then you go through your traditional trough of disillusionment. And then from there, you're able to actually see the value, understand it, your organization matures and is really able to unlock what the cloud has delivered. And this year has been a great testament to that. If you think about organizations that had to completely change their business models and respectively their IT organizations as well. And we've seen that the cloud has been validated. It's been validated because of the expectations, the fact that all of our IT infrastructure has been stress tested, specifically the cloud. Organizations that needed to scale their resources, scale their compute, and have additional resources from the cloud were able, for the most part, to get that from these public cloud vendors and service providers as well. So after this great stress test that we've seen and the influx of changes and digital demands, it's clear that it's not about a hype cycle around cloud anymore. It's actually unlocking the value and really understanding, what do we do next? What does my organization sit within my cloud strategy? And am I able to execute it on it? Because if you think about it, right? From COVID perspective, just in the last couple of years, talking to last couple of months, talking to our customers, we're able to see that there's a massive demand on digital services, right? Whether that was net new applications or improvements or updates to those applications to serve the needs of today. Just managing higher digital usage, right? Whether that was web on your applications, anything that's critical to your organization. That also includes hospitals as well, especially even shops that are transitioning from brick and mortar to e-commerce as well. Saw a massive demand on digital services for payment processing. Then you have your customer experience that had to modify itself from being a hybrid physical digital to sometimes fully digital experiences, right? So these are outward facing situations as well, but even think about from a remote work perspective, having to adopt new SaaS applications, resources, and also being able to have to scale storage and things like that, right? So we put a massive strain on our IT on our infrastructure, whether that was on premise, whether it was using a service provider, but mostly the public cloud, right? So organizations look to the public cloud for compute, for storage, for scale, to be able to spin up more resources, even accelerating DevOps and transforming that with cloud native services, and even getting maybe even fancier, right, with your plug and play AI and machine learning capabilities that organizations like Azure, AWS, Google Cloud Platform deliver. So it's clear that the cloud has been validated. We know it works. We know that we've stress tested it, and it's our best option to accelerate digital transformation. But not every organization is equal. We know that our customers, organizations that we talk to all over the world, are completely different journeys. And if you take a step back and look, even a decade ago, most organizations were looking at taking baby steps into the cloud. Most started maybe even replacing or slightly replacing their secondary sites that they use for disaster recovery. They realized that why would I have to refresh, maintain all of these capital expenditures, all this labor and resources dedicated to just maintaining a physical site when I can move these mission critical workloads to the cloud, fail over to a target site in the public cloud, or even a service provider. So we saw organizations take that baby step, be able to place trust in the cloud for DR, and then realize, okay, if I'm already doing this for my mission critical applications, it makes complete sense for me to also unlock public cloud or a service provider for backup and being able to host that in cheap and deep storage instead of having to continue to buy more storage, maintain it, and refresh your hardware as well. So we saw organizations take that baby step from DR, adding backup, some even moving their full protection strategy to the cloud. And what we're seeing now as well is organizations have now decided, just because of where they are within their digital transformation, that they actually want to run production in the cloud, right? So if you want to run production in the cloud, you're going to require to keep the lights on still, right? You have different disruption scenarios, but nonetheless, there's still disruption scenarios, and you cannot depend on some of these cloud native tools. So you still need a platform to be able to deliver DR, backup, and mobility for your completely 100% cloud environments as well. So after talking to our customers, speaking with analysts, doing our own research, we kind of found an understanding of what are the key requirements, right? When you think about data protection, when you think about DR, when you think about mobility, what are the key requirements, regardless of whatever stage you are as an organization within cloud, to be able to be successful within the next decade? And what we saw was it all starts with flexibility. And what I mean by that, right, a lot of the reasons why organizations moved away from secondary sites for DR was because of the vendor lock-in, right? A lot of these DR solutions used array-based replication, and you have to have similar or the same vendor for your infrastructure. And that presents a problem. So the first and foremost thing that you have to focus on is when I look at a platform for DR, for backup, for mobility, a cloud data management platform, is it flexible? Is it tied to a specific vendor, or do I have the ability to work with the infrastructure, the public cloud vendor, the service provider that best fits my needs? After that, it's about software. We realize that most of the backup vendors and solutions that we've seen in the last 20 years are just slightly improved versions of appliances that also require agents, and that comes with its own challenges as well and secondary costs. And really the focus is moving away from a dependency on hardware. If you're moving away from a dependency on hardware for your secondary site, why still retain an appliance to do so and the challenges that come with it? So it's really a focus on making sure that this platform is not just software defined, but software only. You're not having to get a box delivered and get professional services in weeks to be able to do this. Something that you can be up and running within minutes. And the next aspect is around mobility as well, being able to have the full control to move this data. Sometimes you realize that you have migrated to a specific vendor and maybe it doesn't fit your needs. Maybe you've seen something that works better for your environment. Having the ability to actually move quickly, test it, or come back from a cloud is extremely important, especially if you're thinking from a multi-cloud strategy perspective. And I think maybe the most important one is simplicity, right? The reason that organizations are moving to cloud native services, the reason that they're using cloud as an infrastructure is to simplify their experience. So this platform that you're using to protect those workloads has to be simple as well. Not just simple, but actually scalable, that you know that there's not a limit on the VMs that you're able to protect, on the containers that you're able to protect, or even the SaaS workloads as well. And ultimately, goes hand in hand with simplicity is making sure that this is API enabled to be able to automate so that you're not having to do manual labor this whole time, similar to the manual processes that you had with hardware-based and physical DR as well. So these are the key requirements. And if you look at how Zerto has evolved as an organization, how Zerto has evolved as a platform, it's interesting to see how we're trying to follow these imperatives and making sure that we're delivering the options for customers as well. And our bread and butter over a decade ago was DR, right? Based on continuous data protection, being able to replicate to another site with the best RPOs and RTOs in the industry. From that, we realized the value of public cloud, the fact that our customers were already adopting that, and we made sure to integrate with Azure, with AWS as well, and other service cloud providers as well, and be able to deliver DR to the cloud. After that, we realized the opportunity for DRaaS for service providers to do so. So in another version, we added DRaaS as well. From there, we realized we're delivering disaster recovery, but one of the key elements of a platform is to be able to move that data, to be able to migrate it effectively and quickly. And RDR was renowned for not only having the best performance, but doing so without any impact on your environment, without disruptions. And we transfer that over to our migration capabilities in that version as well. After that, and hearing from customers in the market as well, we realized that VMware on public cloud was extremely crucial for vSphere organizations, especially enterprises. After that, we focused on adding backup to the public cloud with Azure and AWS. And one thing that we have announced and I will preview during this presentation is also the fact that we're going to be delivering cloud native disaster recovery and backup as well. And that's extremely exciting. So when you think about Zerto and you think about our platform and everything that it does, the ultimate goal of what we do, right? We know that competitors and everybody delivers DR, they deliver backup, they deliver a form of workload mobility. What we want to deliver in our cloud data management strategy is the easiest, simplest, fastest, and most flexible approach for you to protect, move, and manage your workloads across that environment. And with that, I want to kind of get into a little bit more of the technical detail of how this platform actually works, what makes Zerto special, and why is it optimized for the cloud as well. So if you think about first at a high level of our architecture, you look at Zerto as it's a software-only install, right? So you're not continuing having to add additional products and SKUs. You're simply downloading a software, installing a Windows install in your hypervisor, and simply there's nothing else that's needed, right? So there's a small footprint. You don't have to buy more storage. You don't have to buy an appliance. It's low overhead. And with that, you also have your local backup storage that you can use. Ultimately, use DR storage, whether that's on-premise or in the cloud, and also unlock what we call long-term retention storage, which is being able to essentially move the journal and target AWS or Azure for cheap and deep storage. Now with that, the most important and most foundational aspect of Zerto's technology, it's always on replication, the fact that it's continuous. And it's really made up of two critical components. And you have to remember, this is software only that sits at the hypervisor level, whether that's vSphere or Hyper-V. And you have your ZVM. Think of that as your Zerto Virtual Management, which is extremely easy to deploy and fast to install, right? And you have a one-on-one relationship here with the hypervisor management component. And this is just a Windows application. The engine of this, right, the replication engine is the VRA that you're seeing there on both sites. This is the virtual replication appliance. It's a scale-out architecture, an extremely small footprint with built-in compression. And what this does essentially, it creates thousands of checkpoints throughout your day, meaning it's replicating checkpoints with no impact to your production environment every 5-6 seconds. So instead of having daily backup copies or backups every 4 hours or 6 hours because of the strain that snapshots place on your environment, you're simply replicating this data. And all of these blocks are replicated, right? Because we're using block level replication. Think of it as near synchronous to the target site. So there's no performance impact, no reliance on snapshots, no agents or even overhead on that as well. So that is what makes Zerto very unique from an RPO perspective. This is what gives us the ability to deliver RPOs of seconds. But another piece of this is the actual mechanism that we have to be able to recover these files, these sites, these VMs and applications. And that's our journal. And to simply put it, our journal, think of it as a log that contains all of those checkpoints that we've just discussed. You have a journal per VM with seconds of granularity. And to illustrate this, let's use a common example like ransomware, right? So, think of a ransomware attack, and in theory, you are attacked at a specific point in time that you've determined, right? So you know the moment of encryption, you know when it's safe to roll back. With Zerto, you have the ability to simply roll back to a couple seconds before. And using this journal, you can recover an entire site, an entire application, single VMs and files as well. Not only from a couple seconds ago, but years from now, because we've extended that into secondary storage as well. So this really falls in line with the RPO conversation of having seconds of granularity. But what about RTOs? Well, let's think about your traditional backup technology. With your traditional backup, the nature of your applications are multi-VM, right? So let's say that you're doing a daily or nightly backup. That application that you're backing up is going to inherently have inconsistent checkpoints for all of the VMs that make up that application. And when you're simply just backing this up and archiving, that's fine. But when you actually have to recover from it, that's when it's problematic, because then you have to find the common denominator checkpoint of all of the VMs that make up this application. This takes a lot of time. Usually you end up, especially in a ransomware scenario, with organizations simply having to rebuild their file directories. So what we do much differently in Zerto is the fact that we treat your applications and all of the VMs that pertain to that application as a cohesive, logical entity. So what we do is you can simply designate all of the VMs that belong to this application, set your SLAs, have your predefined recovery settings for automation and orchestration, and it's independent of where the VM lives in the VMware vCenter or the SCVMM environment. So what you do is you're simply just treating them like one stack and one entity. Now I showed you kind of what that inconsistent path of recovery looks like for backup, but with Zerto, based on our replication, based on how we treat these multi-VM applications, you simply can recover to a granular checkpoint in time of seconds consistently. That is a massive differentiator when it comes to the RTO conversation. It's really what makes a lot of our customers happy. I'm just going to take a second and drink some coffee. So, we've talked about the RTOs, we've talked about RPOs and how the journal helps in our replication always being on and the way that we treat your application. So another thing that makes Zerto unique is the way that our architecture works. Because we're software only, because of the way that we integrate, if you think about Zerto at a high level, you have all of these capabilities and all of these choices from an infrastructure perspective, right? So if you have an on-premise environment, you have your local backup, you have your journal there, and you have the ability, even up to 30 days, to be able to perform your daily restores. Think of that as from a backup perspective. I need to restore a file or folder to production. You can do that locally. And when it comes to DR scenarios, whether you have a on-premises secondary site or preferably a public cloud site, you can replicate to that, fail over to that site and have no issues there as well and retain the same RPO performance. And then when it comes to solving for backup as well, specifically around archive and compliance, you can select whether you want to use disk, cloud, or object storage. We do not care what you choose. The goal of Zerto is to be completely independent and giving you the confidence to choose the infrastructure that works best for you. But now, when it comes to the public cloud, that's a key aspect of showing you why Zerto is actually optimized for the public cloud, right? We've looked at the components of our architecture. You looked at the ZVM and the VRA, and that was explained from an on-premise perspective. From a cloud perspective, if you look at our cloud native architecture, we have what we call a Zerto Cloud Appliance. And this ZCA is the all-in-one appliance that combines the virtual management component of Zerto, the replication appliance as well. And this sits at the target site of the selected public cloud. For example, whether it's AWS or Azure. It runs on a Windows server and it installs in minutes. We utilize cloud native scaling. You utilize the cloud storage of your choice, whether that's AWS S3 or even blob storage as well. And a critical aspect is that only storage and compute is used during the recovery. That is making sure that we drive those costs down as well. So if you look at how this architecture works with Microsoft Azure, when you're implementing Zerto within Azure, we deploy the ZCA from the Azure Marketplace. You combine that management component, as we've talked about, which is the ZVM, and the replication agent, which is the VRA, into one. An Azure storage account is used and can automatically be created by the ZCA and utilized to store the incoming replicated data. And that's using Azure Blob Storage. And you can still utilize within your on-premise and Azure environment, local backup, DR, and LTR, and still have complete mobility of those workloads as well. And the same thing applies to AWS, right? It's just different components. Really, the goal of Zerto is that there is no real difference in the experience and performance of whether you're on-premise, where you're on the public cloud, or even something like VMware on the public cloud. That's a critical one as well, if you think about it. So we've seen this, you've probably seen a lot of announcements from us around this this year, and also from the public cloud vendors as well. But many organizations are seeing VMware on public cloud as the fastest way for their enterprise to move to the cloud. And we think about the vendors that offer that and that Zerto supports, right? It's going to be Microsoft Azure with the Azure VMware solution, Google Cloud with the Google Cloud VMware Engine, the Oracle Cloud VMware solution, and IBM Cloud as well. They all deliver very similar services. And what those services are is really the ability to natively run your VMware workloads in the public cloud. All of the benefits of the public cloud without having to make a lot of the adjustments that you have to, especially in a VMware heavy organization. And what I mean by that is, if you think about organizations that have years of VMware policies and configurations across maybe even thousands of VMs and applications, that takes a lot of time and skill to be able to refactor those applications, to be able to re-architect and manage those VMware policies. So when you think about it, VMware on public cloud gives you the fastest, most agile capability to simply move, maintain business as usual with the way that you operate within vSphere, but just utilizing all of the benefits of the public cloud. And what I mean by that is still have the comfort of your VMware environment, the policies and configurations that you have, with the reliability, with the scale and the operational model of the public cloud. For very large enterprises and organizations that have pretty complex environments, this is the fastest way to be able to move to the public cloud. Many organizations do it themselves and they're able to build that skill set up and move directly to the public cloud, and that's awesome. But for those organizations that can't, this gives them an excellent opportunity to do so as quickly as possible, especially if there's some type of digital demands. For example, if you have a VMware environment, but you still want to develop some cloud native applications and accelerate your DevOps, you can do that. And the architecture is exactly the same. There are no differences on the components. There are no differences on the appliance. It's actually exactly the same as our on-premises architecture. It just so happens that your target site is VMware on public cloud, whether that's Google, Azure, IBM, or even Oracle. And some organizations are even moving fully to VMware on the public cloud because we also do enable a cross-cloud replication as well. So you can even fail over to multiple sites. So that's really a key element. We've talked about on-premise and the evolution of people, taking DR and backup to the public cloud, even now VMware on public cloud. But one that we really can't forget about either is what Zerto does for managed service providers. That's a critical aspect for organizations that maybe don't have a large enough team for backup and DR, or maybe are really just trying to offset that and focus on innovation. And they really want to give the responsibility to the service provider. So years ago, we added the capability for DRaaS, but realized that If you're already protecting your VM, your mission critical application with Zerto, why not back it up as well? And that's something that, as we announced Zerto 8.5, we gave those news to managed service providers, and many of them will be adopting this capability. And what I mean by that is, you know how our disaster recovery as a service works, right? We have delivered RPOs of seconds in one experience. Our service providers pride themselves in their ability to deliver DRaaS with Zerto. What we did that was a little differently was the fact that we gave them the opportunity to add two core features, that being one-to-many replication and long-term retention. This gives service providers the ability to not only give you a DRaaS service, but also give you a backup as a service on those same critical applications that you're delivering. This makes it a better option for you. You have a single experience for that application, and you gain all of those benefits. And whether you are having an on-premise site and you are using a service provider as a target site, or you're fully in a service provider environment, Zerto will work at the same for all of them. And that's a critical piece as well. So if you think about what we've talked about, public cloud, VMware, we've talked about service providers as well, but we know that a massive reason for why organizations are moving to the cloud as well is for microservices, right? Not only for SaaS, but to accelerate DevOps. And the way that people are doing that is via containers. And we know that Kubernetes is really the de facto container orchestration technology at the moment. But as these organizations are moving to a DevOps model, this reliance on microservices, which usually is containers, is a starting point. And if you look at some of the stats from IDC, it's really interesting. We see that their IDC is predicting that container usage is expected to increase by 89% in the next 2 years. And that 90% of all applications will feature at some point microservices architectures by 2022. It's really interesting to see the explosion that we're seeing and even more rapid adoption of microservices and container-based applications versus VMs. So with Kubernetes being the de facto container orchestration technology, our first release is focused on Kubernetes, whether you're running it on-premise or in the cloud. And the goal of what we want to do at Zerto is to give you the same exact experience that you have with your VMs within Zerto with your containerized applications. That means extending our replication, our continuous data protection, the ease of use to next gen. It's not just about containers in the future, right? It's also looking at serverless, looking at PaaS and SaaS technologies as well. But our focus for Kubernetes is giving you backup and disaster recovery that is exactly the same as the experience that you have with Zerto. So if you look at some of the key capabilities, and actually something I want to go back to is the fact that what's coming up really soon is our beta on the 17th of November for Zerto for Kubernetes. So keep an eye on that. But when we look at a lot of the differentiating factors of Zerto for Kubernetes, one of the most important ones is looking at it from a DevOps perspective, right? Data protection as code. To be able to integrate both data protection and disaster recovery into the application deployment lifecycle from day one, not making it a disparate process that requires more time. That would not be conducive to what you're trying to accomplish with a microservice using containers. But also being able to deliver continuous replication. This means always on replication that provides protection and fast recovery of persistent volumes within and between clusters, data centers, or clouds. And as we talked about just right from the beginning, a key requirement is simplicity and automation. Having easy management with powerful kubectl plugins and native Kubernetes for tooling for failover testing, restores, rollback restores, and commits. But you're going to see a lot of vendors deliver, backup and DR capabilities at some point, right? I think everyone's going to have API automation. Everyone's going to have some form of workflows. But what we see Zerto being as completely different, unique, and really a differentiator are three things. The first one is being able to actually unify DevOps and IT infrastructure to accelerate the development of these highly resilient Kubernetes applications. The second one is being able to maximize your Kubernetes investment and leverage all the benefits of containerized applications because you're unlocking all of the value of the platform, everything from the analytics, the replication, the cloud integrations, and the orchestration technology. And most importantly as well, being able to reduce the complexity and cost of having to have a backup product for your VMs, a backup product for SaaS, a backup product for your containers as well. Putting everything within one platform for backup, DR, and mobility with the ease and the flexibility that Zerto provides you, not locking you into anything specific. So this is an interesting announcement, so stay tuned because we will have our beta on the 17th, and we're really excited to roll that out and deliver a lot of value there. And look out for us at CNCF as well, the upcoming conference. So now that we've looked at cloud native applications and microservices and the Kubernetes, there's another aspect of cloud native that's extremely important. And we've talked about it from the beginning. And what that is organizations that are looking to run production fully in the cloud. And the reason that a lot of these organizations are doing so is because of the infrastructure reliability that you're seeing from really the big three vendors, right? From a public cloud perspective, AWS, Azure, and GCP. When you look at how the dynamics of things are changing, the fact that, yeah, if you have an on-premise environment, you have a secondary site, you have a reliability factor of 1. With the public cloud, you have multiple availability zones, multiple regions that you're able to replicate to. And you get all of the value, all of the OpEx focused model of moving your productions to the cloud with the reliability of a massive organization. So with that, we know that already customers are trying to use this. So our goal, and something that we announced at our October launch a couple of weeks ago for Zerto 8.5, was our ability to deliver cloud native disaster recovery for AWS next year. Now, we start off with cloud native disaster recovery, but really the goal is to extend all of the capabilities of the Zerto platform for cloud data management and protection, of DR, of local continuous backup, of long-term retention and complete mobility for your region requirements. So if you're working with AWS and you know that maybe you're already running full production, or you're thinking about running full production in AWS next year, within our first version, we're going to have region disaster recovery, right? So RTOs and RPOs of minutes with the ability to perform failover tests. We expect Move to come in within an update and to continue adding mobility and backup capabilities to our in-cloud AWS product. And a little preview into what that's actually going to look like. If you're familiar with working with AWS, the technology on their target site is, it's dependent on AWS. So we're going to be using their AWS-based replication. We're going to have what we call the Zerto in-cloud manager that's going to be on the recovery site. AWS is going to manage and invoke the replication. You're going to get VM level crash consistency. On the Zerto side, what you're going to get that's a differentiator as well is the rest of the platform, right? You're not going to have a performance impact. There's no requirements for agents. You get the Zerto orchestration, and you also get to include this in the rest of your Zerto experience, so that you really focus on one unique experience of continuous data protection, whether you're using a public cloud for backup, whether you have DR to the public cloud, or you're actually recovering from region to region as well. So stay tuned for this. We have some really exciting announcements and really focus on making sure that we're the best, most scalable, easiest to use solution for in-cloud disaster recovery and eventually backup as well. And as we talked about Zerto being software defined and software only, truly software only. It's about our experience as well. We can talk about our replication and how valuable all this technology is, but if it's hard to use, it really doesn't matter. So what we're trying to do is making sure that it doesn't matter where Zerto is deployed. The UI is going to look exactly the same. Those principles remain unchanged because simplicity is key. That no matter where the workload is, no matter what the workload is, you have full visibility into your entire environment so that you understand where your applications are they being protected, and how do I optimize my environment to make sure this works best. So if we look at Zerto Analytics, one of the things that I love about Zerto Analytics is the fact that it's SaaS, right? So this is browser-based. You have access to it anywhere in the world, and it's also mobile friendly. And most importantly of all, it's API enabled. So within Zerto Analytics, you can, at any time, you can monitor performance. You can monitor your consumption from a storage perspective, from a compute perspective, and I know. You can look at the status, the protection status of your applications, of your VMs, kind of making sure your RPOs are where you're happy with. and even looking at your entire site topology. So what we've seen here is, and one of the interesting, because of the nature of Zerto Analytics being SaaS, is that every couple of weeks we're adding net new features and new capabilities that just make it easier to use, just give you one more insight, one more report that allow you to optimize your environment. And one of my favorite things about this as well is most visibility, most analytics platforms that are delivered, within competitors are focused on historical data, making sure, see what worked, what didn't work, how much storage are you using. But what we really differentiate ourselves is in our ability to give you insights into the future. And with that, it's what we call the Zerto Resource Planner, which is built in and included in Zerto Analytics. What you can do here is take a look at your current on-premise environment and say, oh, I want to consolidate a data center, or I want to move this somewhere else. Or more importantly, I want to move this to Azure, to the public cloud. And what we do is we kind of remove the veil of mysticism sometimes that people have with understanding what their resources requirements will look like if they move to the cloud. And we'll tell you exactly how many ZCAs you'll need, right? Those are the appliance component that has replication and management for Zerto. It's a software install. We'll give you your WAN requirements, the storage required for the size of the journal, the recovery disk size. And what we allow you to do as well is to actually make it a timeline. Predict your compression, look at your journal history, and then even dive in specifically to the VM level statistics. So even if you're not a Zerto customer, you can actually use the Zerto Resource Planner with a little bit of help and really understand is, first of all, if I would like to use Zerto in general, what do my resource requirements look like? And if I am using Zerto and I want to move to the cloud, what does that look like? So this is a really key and underrated feature that most people aren't aware of that's extremely important for those organizations that are thinking about moving to the cloud, especially if you're making that first step of moving DR to the cloud as well. So to really summarize what makes Zerto special in the context of cloud, in the context of backup, DR, and mobility to the cloud, are three core things. And with that is the first one, meaning you got to be able to keep the lights on. You got to be able to keep the lights on when you move to a new technology. And that's a huge pain point for a lot of organizations. But it's not just about keeping the lights on. It's about continuously improving your SLAs. We also know that 24/7 availability requirements are a thing and are going to be a continued expectation as we move towards a fully digital experience. So you have to make sure that your RTOs and RPOs can keep up and they can keep up in new platforms. And at Zerto, regardless of the platform that you're using, we're going to deliver the industry-leading RTOs and RPOs of seconds, both for DR and for backup, so that regardless of where you go, you have the confidence to be able to quickly move. And one use case that I want to specifically hone on, because I think it's a top of mind for all of us, is ransomware recovery itself. Because of the way that our technology works, because we're software only, because of our RPOs and the way that our journal allows you to granularly select a checkpoint of seconds, we deliver the fastest, simplest experience to recover from ransomware. We have many use cases. We even have a lot of presentations and videos and customer testimonials within our website that you can check out about what the difference was using traditional backup tape and disk to recover from ransomware, and what it did using Zerto from an RTO perspective, from an RPO, but also giving peace of mind to the IT team as well. And the third one that's really critical for this next decade of cloud that we're seeing is, can I move this data easily? Can I do it without a massive planning period? Can I do it without data loss, without disruption? And so when you think about the three things that Zerto truly gives you that is different from the rest of the competitors, is the best RTOs and RPOs, the simplest ransomware recovery, and complete infrastructure flexibility and governance of your data for migrations and mobility. And that's really what makes the Zerto strategy work so well when we talk about multi-cloud data management. That doesn't matter, first of all, what your hypervisor is, right? Whether you're working with vSphere or Hyper-V, it doesn't matter what your public cloud vendor is. It doesn't matter if you're going directly to public cloud or VMware on public cloud or even a service provider. It's that the platform requirements stay consistent throughout, and then they do so for the additional workloads that we're planning on delivering for too. It's not just about VMs either. And that's a summary of what the Zerto platform looks like for cloud data management and protection. I think I've honed in on DR, on continuous backup, on LTR, on the data mobility, But also we have a lot of use cases around test and development, use cases around security and compliance. For example, being able to isolate an application, test its integrity before rolling back to production. This is extremely important in any type of exploit or ransomware attack that has to do with encryption. All of this is on a foundation of continuous data protection. Think of that always on engine, that replication that really differentiates Zerto from the rest. And the three components that are consistent across all of these use cases is the orchestration, the automation, and the analytics. And it doesn't matter what vendor you're working for, our goal and vision is to be able to support all of them in a seamless manner with really no difference in performance. So I really want to thank you guys for your time, but I have a few things here for you that I want to give you and a lot of resources. So the first one is something that actually just got published. And I like this a lot because it's not just an analyst sitting in a room evaluating this after a few conversations. What Infotech, the research group, did here was they did over 580 customer reviews with 11 vendors that were evaluated. And with those customers and their true experience with all of these vendors, they were able to deliver a software quadrant for backup and availability. And you can dive down to very, very specific experiences, capabilities, and you can see Zerto as a prominent leader just because of our experience and our capabilities and our ability to also continue delivering high customer satisfaction. I highly recommend that you download this. And if you actually check our chat box within the GoToWebinar control panel, I have 3 specific links on there. And I believe the last one contains the link to the Zerto purchase a copy of the Infotech research group. Now, apart from this, I have a few other resources as well that I'd like to take a look at, especially for those folks that are like, well, you know, I could read a white paper, I could read this report, but what I really want to do is I want to get my hands on the product. I want to be able to see what this looks like, how it would work in my environment. And so what we have available for free is our Zerto Labs as well. So you just go to this link, zerto.com, which is also in the chat, and sign up, and you can deploy a lab and quickly understand how Zerto works, whether you want to see our ransomware lab, or more importantly, for today's topic, how we work within the public cloud as well. Something else that I've added, because I think this is extremely important for organizations that are still evaluating, you know, making that first step and moving to DR in the cloud. What I'm seeing is, apologies for that. What we're seeing is this report that we purchased from Gartner. This is not even remotely associated with Zerto. This is simply an objective look of the considerations and the factors that you should have when you're evaluating moving DR to the cloud. All 3 of these links are within the chat box. So I really hope you make use of them just because they are completely beneficial to you, even if you're not ready for Zerto yet. And so with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over to some of the questions because I want to make sure that we're addressing these questions for you guys as well. So just give me a few seconds to open this tab up. So one of the important ones that we got was, do you protect the journal against encryption-based ransomware attack? So yes, so we actually do have security hardening recommendations and ability to be able to configure your ZVM and journal respective to be able to make sure that you're safe from not being able to get your Zerto environment encrypted during a ransomware attack. Let's see, actually that was just 2 questions around that as well. So another question that we've gotten as well is physical. So because we're so focused on a lot of the SaaS cloud native applications as well, we're not supporting physical servers at the moment. So I do want to make sure, Ken, that I answered that question for you. I can provide more context as well and insights into what our plan is for that. Another question is, we're still working on our integration with VMware on AWS. So the vendors that we included are the vendors that we support. Still working on the AWS one, Tim. Let's see what else we got. This is an interesting one too. Can I manage both my on-premise and cloud environment within the same panel? Any VM, any application that you have deployed and protected with Zerto, regardless of how many sites you have, regardless if they sit on-premise or in the cloud, are all going to be within the same panel, within the same environment topology, and you can monitor them all within one window. No need to have multiple interfaces for where your workloads live. So good question there. Does Azure allow for the use of Zerto data replication? Yes. So because of the way that we're working with Azure Blob Storage and how we've able to integrate the APIs, you simply use the exact Zerto-based replication to be able to work and be stored within Azure Blob Storage and Page Blob. So there are no changes from the Zerto replication technology when it comes to failing over or replicating to Azure. Is there another good one here? Is there a retention limit around the backup feature? There is no retention limit. Really, it's whatever you're comfortable with. So the way to differentiate this is when you think about on-premise, when we talked about local backup and DR, with Zerto, you have a 30-day journal on primary storage. You have a maximum of 30 days. Many of our organizations use it 2, 3, 4, 5 days. And then what we've done is essentially unlock secondary storage. Think of a purpose-built backup appliance, NFS or SMB, or the public cloud, where you can store and archive to for as long as you want, as long as your compliance demands it. A few of the other questions that we've gotten to is around licensing. So at the moment, Zerto is licensed per VM. Like for our product that's specific to VMware workloads, it's just licensed per VM to really give you the best possible scenarios and best possible deal. And in that case, we're not mandating a certain purchase either. Another question is Zerto Analytics included within the platform? Yeah, so one of the things that I pride myself on when I talk about ZA is the fact that Zerto Analytics is completely included in the platform. You don't have an additional SKU for ZA, you don't have to pay extra, you have to pay a subscription. You simply enable it the moment you purchase Zerto, and there's no strings attached to that. I think I got another question around the beta. I do want to confirm that the beta for Zerto for Kubernetes will be on the 17th of November. And so what I would like to do is, for the rest of the questions, because sometimes the UI can be difficult to analyze all these questions, is I'll make sure that I get the rest of these and that I specifically answer your question via email. I hope that you still have time to select the links in the chat, and really hope you enjoyed this. I always enjoyed talking to our prospects, our customers in the field, and I want to thank you so much for your time and the opportunity to speak to you. I hope you do as best as you can with this information. Hopefully we'll see you soon. Thank you so much, and I'll make sure to answer the rest of those questions. Have a good one, everybody.